everybody, we are live. Welcome to a very special panel discussion that we're having with the creator of Brindlewood Bay, Public Access, the Gauntlet Publishing on a whole, and the latest TTRPG system, The Between. Now, if you've seen a lot of our promos, you would know a bit, an inkling about what this is about. But yeah, if you've ever wanted to play a Victorian monster hunter and all that jazz of acting fancy while getting down dirty, this is the game for you. But to go a little bit more into it, Jason, I'd love to invite you on. But sorry, before that, I'd also like to introduce our two other members on this panel as well. Monica from the Pigeon Killers, who you've met before, and Aman. Aman, you haven't seen his face yet, but you would have heard him over at the Infinite Tavern podcast. They have been nominated for the Crit Awards, which is coming out tomorrow with their, I think, who wins, the results of who wins. So go check out that podcast as well. But back over to you, Jason. Do tell us, what is The Between and how do we get about playing it?
Yeah, so The Between is a game, as you said, about monster hunters in Victorian-era London. You play characters who are residents of a place in London called Hargrave House. And Hargrave House is a big mansion in Belgrave Square, And no one knows who built it. It's been there for hundreds of years, and no one knows who currently operates it or owns it. But the people who live there have the task of keeping the streets of London safe from monsters, both literal and serial killer type monsters, right? And so they go out through the day. In the day, they're mostly sort of, doing fancy things, vamping around in parlors or whatnot, investigating things that are going on at a street level, and at night they sort of confront these monstrosities a little bit more directly. And it is a game that is inspired most directly by the television show Penny Dreadful, but also takes a lot of inspiration from British horror classics, graphic novels like From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and things like that. Also, pulp era fiction is really a big influence on it. Mechanically, the game is based off of my other game, Brindlewood Bay, and it also has like a really strong sort of Powered by the Apocalypse core at it. But the sort of mystery solving mechanics, it's primarily an investigation and mystery game. Those are rooted in the mechanics of Brindlewood Bay. Though it does, if you're familiar with Brindlewood Bay, it actually it expands and adds to the sort of carved from Brindlewood system in some really interesting ways, which I gather we'll probably talk about. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
And how you can get it. I will tell you, just since you did ask the question. We are going to be doing, so this game has been out for 3 years, actually. It's been, in its current form, it's been out for a while. But we're getting ready to release a new version that we're going to be crowdfunding on BackerKit September 24th. But right now, the original version that's been out there for a few years, you can get it for free. Just go to DriveThruRPG. It's available for pay what you want. I recommend paying nothing because we're going to be asking for your money for BackerKit. So give us your money then. But no, go download it. You get the entire game. Check it out, see if you like it, so yeah, it's a really, really full-featured preview of what you'll get with BackerKit. So yeah.
Awesome. And even just going through this new book after we went through Brindlewood Bay last year, and it already shocked us because we came in as gossipy old grannies, and suddenly we were thrust into some really dangerous situations. But what I think I loved most about that game, and I saw elements of that in this as well, is the way that players themselves really make the case, even if there are clues scattered around, even if there are threats scattered around. It's what we make of it, what the sort of idea or the situation, how we're tying in those clues together, and that actually becomes how we solve the mystery. And I really loved how it takes away that pressure from the keeper to have to just keep this vast amount of knowledge in their head that they probably don't get to use, and then having to decide an ending and kind of be forced to railroad the situation a little, get the players to come to the scene or do a certain task, or
just tell them what was happening. Just tell them at the end, this is what was going on.
And this is so much cooler because as a party you get to decide what's happening and where this adventure, where the investigation rather is going to go. And the themes in this, taking it from a very American small town to something that's, old-timely British. How did you start deciding on this sort of setting and the different sort of motives and players that the people playing this game are going to encounter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I said that the game was inspired by Penny Dreadful, that was basically it. I really love Penny Dreadful, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I was like, there's a game here. I know there's a game here, and I want to find this game, right? And so that was the main inspiration. Was I just wanted to make what I considered to be the Penny Dreadful role playing game, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I got thinking about the characters you would play, the core characters that are available in the game, now it's been expanded a lot in the years since it first came out, but originally the sort of core 6 or 7 characters were directly inspired by a character in Penny Dreadful, right? And so so that connection is pretty one-to-one and pretty straightforward. That said, you're not just playing another version of the Penny Dreadful character. There's lots of space to make the character your own, but at a basic level, they've been inspired by that. So, you have the character you have the vessel who like literally lets dark entities fill their body so that they can then power magic, right? That's Ava Green's character in Penny Dreadful, right? Mm-hmm. But in order to get that, they have to sort of like make these like kind of lurid and taboo sacrifices, right? In order to get these entities to give them their power. You have the American who is also a werewolf, and they're hiding out in London, like trying to escape, something that they did back in America, and so that's pretty clearly inspired by Josh Hartnett's character in Penny Dreadful. So Penny Dreadful was a big inspiration for the initial playbooks, but in the years since the game has been out, we've expanded it a lot, and there are now lots of characters and archetypes that are inspired by just like different types of Gothic horror and Gothic literature. You have I think one of my favorite playbooks that is coming out as part of Backer Kit, it's not out yet generally, it's going to be exclusive to Backer Kit, is this sort of like Artful Dodger inspired character, like and they're all about like kind of like stealing from the rich, but in this case the rich is like a literal like dragon figure in the city in a sense, so they're kind of like raiding the dragon's horde, so to speak. It's a really, really neat kind of playing with like just sort of like themes and kind of weaving in some like classic fantasy stuff as well. So the game has kind of expanded quite a bit. There's also in more recent years, we've expanded the game to have more of a, like, you can introduce like more science fantasy type elements. And so there's a Martian character and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's very much, it had its like initial inspirations, but it's kind of expanded a little bit in the years to come. So.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned this to you before we started, but even I think one of the first things I look at when I'm building a new character or even just playing a game is going and looking at the player books and see what sort of feeling I want to give to my character. And I see Mother and Orphan, and I'm thinking of Tom Sawyer and just like a lot of like Jane Austen, like all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, okay, how is this going to turn out? And I looked at Mother, and I see this dissection of a little child. I'm like, okay, this is not the sort of mother I was thinking of. And then I realized that you get to play Victor Frankenstein, and
it's Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah. It's Dr. Frankenstein.
And even the Orphan as well, like not looking at it as just an abandoned child, a literal abandoned creation as an orphan, like just the sort of flavor that came to it as well is just so interesting to see.
And
yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying, like, even I was just going through the book, and the potential of, I mean, you've already almost hit or crossed the narrative potential of like what each game can have because of the flavor. And like I said, we both agree, like Penny Dreadful was an awesome series. Gone too soon, I would say.
I would say so too. Yeah.
It had. I mean, I feel like this is a way for me to like make my own narrative in a way to satisfy that curiosity of what it would it be like to be sort of a Van Helsing sort of a character to have.
Yeah.
And
one of the later playbooks is called The Legacy, and the Legacy is that they are like everybody in Hargrave House is a monster hunter, but the Legacy is a Van Helsing type. Like they were born to do it. Like their family, like trained them to hunt monsters. But by the time we reach them in the game, they're kind of like, they're sort of tired of their family's legacy of bloodshed, and they want to be free of it, but they can't be free of it until they complete this one final hunt that has like bedeviled their family for centuries, right? And so and that's actually really important to the overall kind of themes of the game, and it kind of dovetails with what Kumi asked earlier, which is like these characters. It's called the Between. The game is called the Between for different reasons, and one of the reasons why is because these characters are sort of, they're at the threshold of something new, right? They have this incredibly mysterious past, which in character and out of character, you're literally not allowed to talk about until the game says you can, and they have these mysterious pasts, and they are here at Hargrave House, and they're facing an uncertain future. Like, so they're kind of like in the middle of like really extremes in their life, right? Like this monster hunting they're doing in London is not even the most extreme thing they've been through in their life, right? And the legacies are really like interesting application of that, because it's like they have a literal like legacy of bloodshed and death that they are trying to shake off, but they can only do that by continuing the legacy of bloodshed and death, right? Like, so it's that's sort of, that's where the game often finds the characters, like the characters being trying to reconcile their past, but just falling back into bad cycles and just continuing to be bad. So
What I find interesting is the factotum. Basically, like, you are not part of it, but you somehow entered this place, and you have to do it now, because like I really like side characters more than the main character. So this is like something that is kind of intriguing to me. So a person who doesn't have anything to do with it, but they somehow entered it, and now they have to get the job done. So something is like, this is very interesting.
Well, and the factotum is interesting because mechanically they are probably the most powerful character. Like they get the most done, and their moves are very strong. But thematically, they have to defer to another character who is their employer, and that character has to get all the glory. So basically, you as the factotum are doing the heavy lifting, while your boss gets all the credit and the glory of it, you know? So it's an interesting role-playing scenario to be in, like just this idea of like, I have to sublimate my own desires and talents to this person who may be undeserving, right? Which is really fun to explore.
Yeah, and I think it is really cool also the mechanic itself being that don't like dwell out information. I think most other TTRPGs ask you to come in very intense with your backstory, introduce yourself in the beginning so that the rest of the table immediately knows certain cues to pick up of and how to interact with your character. But here they get you to keep it so close to your heart, you know, and even just having, I think, the Vulnerable move and the Janus Mask together to being really the two most critical moments in time to be able to delve out what and who you are, how these situations have affected you. And it's not just a conversation starter, really. It's being thrust into a really dangerous situation, and that kind of forces you to just maybe question your own morality a little, and then allow you to connect with another player. And how did you even looking at the different themes over here, I did love the little note that you put telling people how to approach the game and how to play it, which is like the do's and the don'ts.
Do's and don'ts. Oh, I love it.
But from a standpoint of someone who had to write this RPG out, how did you encounter like Victorian horror, then the gender and power dynamics of the time as well, and even just looking at we've had supernatural stories throughout our lives in different myths and even in just some urban legends, but how did you choose which to pick? Which felt a little too, did any feel too gimmicky? Did some feel like it was a little too sensitive to put into the game as well? And how do you approach these themes of how much should you tell a player to take from your world versus what they can implement into the world?
That's a really good question. And, it's obviously something I thought about a lot when I was, getting ready to run the game and doing my research and everything. And I would say that the Between, on the surface at least, the Between is not super concerned with historical accuracy. Even just setting aside like, monsters and stuff, the game is very much the game very much imagines this it's almost like an alternate history version of Victorian London, right? Like in this Victorian London, Queen Victoria had a young love affair with the pirate Queen of Barbuda, right? Like it's not something that happened in history, but like that's in between, that's what happened, right? And so at the outset, I wouldn't say the Between is like super concerned with that part of like of the thing. You know, I think, you know, I did my research, and where it's relevant and interesting and salient, I try to make it very accurate, or at least like, you know, kind of reflect the time period. But you know, but in play, in a role playing game, you can't really expect everyone to know everything about, you know, about stuff like this, and so you have to kind of have a lot of leeway. And so, in terms of like more sensitive topics, and I think the question about gender power dynamics is particularly interesting. The thing about the Between is it says within the first few pages that even though in Victorian-era London, like people with different aspects of marginalization probably would not have had like an easy life in Victorian-era London, we are not going to like that is not necessarily the case in the Between. Yeah. So, you know, if you want to play, you know, so like your character's gender expression, ethnicity, neurodivergence, whatever, their nationality, their race, like that is not necessarily a hindrance. Like it's not assumed to be a hindrance. It doesn't, and indeed the game doesn't really doesn't dwell on those things much. That said, there is a lot of space in the game to explore those topics. So, but it does so in a way that I would say is probably more indirect and nuanced. And so, for example, one of the threats are what we call the scenarios in the game, the creatures or killers you're trying to hunt. One of the threats is called Sally No Face, and Sally No Face is a sort of a Jack the Ripper style killer, but what she does is she very carefully and skillfully surgically removes the faces of her victims, and she's doing it presumably for some sort of like artistic project, or maybe she's obsessed with beauty, or maybe there's like some kind of like beauty themes are a thing, right? And obviously, like when we talk about like appearance and beauty, that's a very like gendered topic, right? You know, and so there's room there to kind of explore what that means to your play group and how your characters react to it, without saying definitively like Sally No Face, you know, is her feelings are XYZ, like, because in this game we don't know what Sally's motivations are, because as you mentioned, it is based off the Brindlewood Bay mystery system. And so one of the things you have to do in the game is, you know, the keeper does not know what Sally's motivations are. The keeper knows what Sally does, but doesn't know what Sally's aims are. That's for the play group to determine. And so that's where, as players, you kind of have some control as you're solving the mystery and kind of using your clues to say what Sally is up to. You can kind of play with those ideas, right? So maybe Sally had like, you know, maybe Sally was in some kind of abusive relationship, and that's why she was driven to do the things she does or something, right? You can decide that as a group, and based off the clues you find. And so there are a lot of like places for those topics to come up, but like everything in the game, it's very, very player driven, and so it's sort of like, you know, where do you want to go with it, right? And that's true on the playbook level too, right? I mean, probably the one playbook that is the most like, here is Jason having an opinion about something, is the Explorer, right? The Explorer is like an irredeemably like bad character. They did bad things. They were terrible perpetrators of colonial violence, and that is going to catch back up with them at the end, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's no avoiding it, right? And but the Explorer aside, the rest of the playbooks are not so black and white. Like it's very like, you can kind of, if you want to explore like your character, you know, different like tough themes or subject matter, as long as it's something that the table is cool with and you've kind of talked about it in terms of like safety tools and stuff, you can do that. Yeah. That felt like a really long answer, but I hope it was helpful.
That's a really good, that was a really good answer. One of the things that you mentioned, which was particularly interesting to me, was, you know, for example, the player group coming up with the motivation for the threads, which is something I haven't seen to be honest, because there's always one side which is of the game master or the keeper in this case, and there's always the player group, right? And obviously there are a lot of games where the players contribute to the world building itself, but usually when as far as the threat goes, or as far as the monster and their lore and motivation goes, that usually falls on the game master. So
Absolutely.
when the players decide like, hey, I believe this is this threat is doing a certain action because I think they're motivated by this, will this be an indication for the game master to then play it up to them, play it up in the gameplay, or is it just something that the players decide has been done, and like the keeper has a choice to move away from that, and give them maybe something as a shock, or maybe something as a plot twist?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I think it's probably best to, well, first of all, I'll say, like, I think it's really important to understand kind of like my game design philosophy that's kind of underpinning the whole thing. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in the power of tabletop role-playing games as a medium of entertainment. And what I mean by that is other mediums of entertainment have advantages that tabletop role-playing games don't have, right? Like in a movie, they have like actors, and they have visuals, and they have music and all this other stuff, right? In a book, you have like a fixed perspective and all this stuff, right? So there's a lot of things that like tabletop role-playing games don't have access to as a medium of entertainment. But the one thing that tabletop role-playing games can do that no other medium of entertainment can do is collaborative storytelling, right? Like we're all sitting around a table and we're going to tell a story together, and we're going to use these rules to facilitate the telling of that story, but we're going to tell a story together. And that's something that only tabletop role-playing games can do. There's nothing else like that. I mean, I think the only thing comparable is, telling ghost stories, around the campfire or something. But like, but as far as games go, as far as like a structured activity goes. And so I believe really, really strongly in that philosophically, in terms of like what motivates me in my game design. And so I think a mystery or investigation game is, I think there's a lot of advantages to taking advantage of collaborative storytelling, of what I think role-playing games are particularly good at. And so to kind of get into an example here, one of the basic threat that a lot of groups will start with is called the St. James's Street Ghost. And the St. James's Street Ghost is really interesting because it's basically like a pretty contained haunted house kind of mystery, right? The player characters are going to go through this house. They're going to look around. They're going to find clues. The clues can be found anywhere. That's how the system works. The keeper can put the clues wherever the players are looking. And the clues are kind of, they're somewhat abstract. Like they don't really like point to anything in particular. They're kind of abstract and open to interpretation. But the whole time, the keeper does not know like anything about the ghost, right? They know how the ghost behaves. They know like what powers the ghost has, but they don't really know like what the ghost is and what their deal is. And so the way the game works is there are questions and opportunities. So the hunters are always trying to first answer a question. And then once they answer the question, they unlock the opportunity. Now, this is different from Brindlewood Bay. Brindlewood Bay, you're just trying to figure out who did the murder. But if you think about it, Brindlewood Bay also has questions and opportunities, except the question is always the same, who did the murder, right? Yeah. And then the opportunity is always the same, bring them to justice, right? In the between, we expand this. And so the question in the St. James's Street Ghost is essentially like, how can we get this ghost to pass on to the next world? like what do we have to do to get this ghost out of here? And the opportunity is to banish the ghost by performing a quieting ritual. And so to answer your question, there are some guardrails there, right? Like you are still within the frame of how do we get it to pass on to the next world and perform a quieting ritual, right? Like those are the only things available in play, right? And so the keeper and players alike are are somewhat like there are some guardrails there. They're somewhat hemmed in like possibilities and what they can do. There's still a lot of room to play there, but I guess what I'm saying is it can't go too far off rails, right? Like the players can't decide that the ghost is a hoax, right? Like we know it's a ghost. It's established early. It's definitely a ghost, right? And so that's how I'd answer that. Like the keeper is, you know, like once the question is answered, it's locked in. Like that is the truth, right? But the players can only pursue the opportunity, right? Like if I say, you know, if we determine like, oh, this ghost is the ghost of a woman who was killed by her lover, and now she's haunting this house because she's pissed about that, right? As you would be, right? And so in order to get her to pass on to the next world, we have to, we have to find like some kind of, we have to like, you know, acknowledge her trauma and ask her to, you know, to forgive for him or whatever, or something like that, right? And, you know, you come up with whatever your process is. The keeper cannot then say, like, if that's true, the keeper cannot like introduce some other random element that would conflict with that basic truth, right? And furthermore, the hunters can't decide, well, we're going to just burn the house down. Well, no, that's not going to help, because the only thing you're allowed to do is to perform the quieting ritual. You can burn the house down, but the ghost is still there. Like, you know what I'm saying? So the questions and opportunities provide like a structure there, right?
Yeah, to go into a little bit more like mechanically itself with everything that you've mentioned, a couple of things that I noticed while just reading, like my first read through the book was to get the players to essentially collaborate and to give a little bit more for setting the scene. You do have a sort of mechanic called paint the scene, which and to just combine a couple of these things together, but and also because all of them sound so cool. You have from painting the scene to the unseen. Also a mechanic that's called, I think, Echoes of the Night. And how do you work all this in getting it to be such a collaborative role-playing experience where everyone has a turn to really invest in kind of developing the story and the world together?
Well, I think it's all about structure, right? I mean, it's a little bit piggybacking off what I just said about the answer a question. Like, I think the structure helps with that. So, you know, the structure of play is divided into phases, you know, day, dusk, dawn, night, and different things happen during each phase. And that structure is nice because essentially you just have to, you know, whenever you're asking the players to really contribute heavily into the world building, in addition to focusing on what their character is doing and their character stuff, you're kind of asking a lot, right? Like you're asking for essentially twice the creative work from the players, right? You're easing the keeper's burden, but you're increasing the player's burden, right? But the structure helps with that. Like so I know during a certain phase, I just have to do these things. And so I can kind of focus my thinking on those things, and we'll worry about these other things when we go to another phase. And so I think the structure helps, but also with things like Paint the Scene, for folks who don't know, Paint the Scene it's a technique I developed back in 2015-ish or so and formalized in my games when I published them, where basically whenever the characters enter a new location, or not every new location, but whenever they enter a new location, most locations, there's a question that the keeper poses to them, and in the answering of that question, we not only see what that place looks like and sounds like and feels like, we also learn something about that place. We explore an idea, right? And so, but there again, the structure helps because the Paint the Scene is triggered when the characters enter the location, right? So if I'm the keeper, I know, okay, they just walked into the mortuary, and now I'm going to ask them the question about the mortuary, right? And so structure is a big part of it. I think it would be an incredibly difficult game to run if you didn't have this scaffolding that you can kind of hang everything on, and everyone kind of knows this is what we're doing right now. This is what we're doing right now. And so, yeah, I guess that's my answer there. But I really think that once your group kind of really gets into the rhythms of it and the grooves of it, and the game is always pinging you as a player to contribute to the world building. It starts small with the paint the scene, right? It's like looking around this house, how can we tell that all walks of life of London can be found here or whatever, right? And everyone's kind of talking about the place and everyone's kind of building up in their mind. But the players, importantly, are kind of learning like, oh, I'm allowed to say things about the world. You know, I can say things about the world. I'm being invited to say things about the world. And so then when we do the unseen, which I'm happy to talk about in more detail, but when we get to that sort of that part of the thing where you're narrating a whole scene that your characters aren't even in, then it's like, oh, I'm really contributing to the world building, so that when we get to answer a question, it's the biggest expression of that. It's like, now tell me what's all happening. Like, tell me what's going on. Tell me the answer to the mystery, right? So at every step, it builds. The players are being like invited to participate in the world building, and I find that once you get into that rhythm, it players love it, and it's kind of hard to go back, to be honest. Like to go back to a game where you're just kind of sitting there and reacting to things, as opposed to like diving in and collaboratively building the world. Yeah.
Juan, do you have any questions as well with this?
I would just like to ask about like, so there are these things that we did in Brindlewood Bay, right? In the end, we were able to kind of completely, you gave us like some time to think about it. And eventually we came up with this whole complete vision of what actually happened. So I just want to ask you some of the examples you had previously with The Between that you played with people, and how they kind of, surprised you in terms of these scenes.
Yeah, well, I've run the game a million times, and so I have to say there are certain threats that I've run probably a dozen times or more, right? And it is always different every time. Like every time the players go into that house in St. James's Street, that ghost is totally different. Its backstory is different. What it was doing, like that's a really cool thing. So one thing I want to point out is like, you can play the scenarios over and over and over again, and you're going to get a different experience every time. Like, I promise it. So that's one fun thing about it. So I'm always frequently surprised. That said, I think the one threat that I run pretty often, and that I'm always really touched and intrigued by, is one called the Limehouse Lurker. So the Limehouse Lurker is a scenario where this woman who owns an opium den comes to Hargrave House because she's got 3 bodies in her basement, and as you do, she's got 3 bodies in her basement, and the bodies are all drained of blood. They were found around the Limehouse district, and she's hiding them from the police because she doesn't want to cause a stir in the neighborhood, right? And so she comes to Hargrave House to help figure out what happened to these bodies. Well, the bodies are all drained of their blood, and there's other details in her story that makes Hargrave House think that it's a vampire. But one thing that we establish early is that the vampire is small. So it's in the body of a child, but that doesn't mean it's a child, right? And so the first question that the players have to answer is the vampire actually a child that was recently struck with vampirism, or is it is it an old vampire just stuck in the body of a child because it was a child when it was turned, right? And so straight away, when you have that sort of threshold question of like, what are we dealing with here? The way the players answer that, they start to tell you what kind of story they're interested in having, right? Because if they decide that the vampire is old, then the next question is, well, if it's old, we're gonna just destroy it, right? Like we're gonna destroy it, or we're gonna chase it away, or whatever. But if it's young, like if it's actually a kid, now it becomes a more morally complicated situation. Like, should we destroy it? Should we just make should we instead like kind of try to manage it so that it like feeds more safely, because it's a kid, it's not its fault that it's a vampire, right? And this is where, when you talk about like surprises, this is where like this threat always has so many surprises like that, because suddenly it's like, we've determined it's a kid and we don't want to destroy it, and so we're going to adopt it essentially, and we're gonna keep it in the attic and feed it routinely. But then sometimes the routine feeding of it becomes a problem, because maybe they intended for it to be like a safe feeding situation, but die rolls go poorly. The keeper kind of gets a little crazy, and now they've lost control of the thing, and it's like killing people. So that is when what's really fun to me is when like the hunters are presented with something of a moral dilemma, and they try to handle it in a acceptable way, or in a nicer way, but then just the environment, the dice, the game just won't let them. And so like things always go bad, right? That to me is when it's like most exciting. But and that's just like one example. Like there are so many like instances where we've discovered in the answering of the question that this monster was actually like a family member, or this monster was or this killer that I used to be this killer's lover, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff like that happens sometimes, and that's when it gets really juicy and really good. Yeah.
Yeah, in that vein as well, like I think the Between uses a similar D6 system where it's quite similar to Brindlewood Bay, but a lot of the moves that you've implemented in this are slightly different. And I just wanted to ask more about, so with the sort of investigation that the players are doing, and I think you do have a mechanic called information moves, right? Where you can use it for your investigation, and that also leads to, I think, two other types of sort of moves, like the vulnerable move, and also the I think the Janus mask move. How can, as a player, when do you know when to use these moves, and when do you feel that it would be beneficial to actually get it to aid you in that situation?
Well, I think as a player, and this will be really important for you all because you're getting ready to play, I know. I think in any definitely in any of my games, and certainly probably in other games that use Apocalypse World and similar games as a basis, I wouldn't dwell on the text of the moves. I wouldn't even dwell on the moves at all. I would just focus on what your character is doing in the story, and if a move is triggered, then so be it, right? That's the key, is the moves have a trigger. So the information moves trigger is when you are searching for information, then it triggers, right? So you don't have to worry about as a player, like, oh, which move am I going to use? Like, no, just say what your character's doing. And then if the keeper needs to like clarify, like, are you trying to trigger the information move, then they'll do that. But usually it's pretty obvious what move is going to trigger. There's only like 5. So, apart from like the playbook moves, there's only like 4 or 5 like basic moves. And so it's usually pretty easy to like get the triggers figured out. The vulnerable move is interesting because that's a little bit more intentional. That's in that scene. The vulnerable move is basically a scene where you and one other hunter have like an intimate moment with each other, where one of you is doing your vice. And these vices, depending on what the vice is, that scene can be a really intriguing scene and can go in a lot of really strange places. But for example, one of like the vessel's vice is like to have sex with dark entities, right? Well, that's really an interesting scene to frame up with another hunter when you're busy letting dark entities have their way, right? Yeah, when you're monster hunting, exactly, right? So you can imagine like the trickiness of that, right? Or maybe you have the vice of looking at memento mori photographs, right? Like photographs of dead people. Like, that's a strange thing to do. But I'm gonna be doing that, and we're gonna have a little vulnerable moment with each other while I'm doing it, right? And so that's a the vulnerable move is a little bit more intentional. It's like you have to frame up that scene, right? But it is a great move because it's one of the only ways you can talk about your past, and it is also you get a free clue as well, which is nice. And so but your bigger question though is like, I would just focus on what your character's doing and then let the triggers trigger. So
Interesting. And even I think the only other place where you really get to know a little bit more about the character, or at least what your companion players are playing, is with the Janus mask.
Janus mask, yeah.
And, oh my gosh, to anyone who doesn't know, this is a way for you to get that lick of death without actually dying. And I think it's so fantastic that if someone fails a check terribly, they still have a sort of...
Kill them, rip them apart, yeah.
And, you're ready to see, like, the spirit essentially leave their body, but you still get to play out that scene. And instead of it just being a complete retcon, it's at least, it's a little view into how they imagine themselves dying and what brings them back as well. And how did this go the first couple of times that you play tested it?
Well, it's pretty unique, right? The Janus mask is, and Brindlewood Bay has a similar thing. The crowns, it's not quite as the crowns aren't quite as dramatic as the Janus mask, but because the game is not as dramatic as between. But this is the Janus mask is such a. It's probably the one part of the game I'm most proud of, from a design standpoint, at least. The idea here is every playbook has two sections. One is called, on their playbook, called the Mask of the Past and the Mask of the Future, right? And the Mask of the Past is 7 narrative prompts that, in order, tell us the history of that character up to the point of Hargrave House, right? And then the Mask of the Future represents like possibility, and they are all each of the prompts in the Mask of the Future is sort of represented by this idea of a door or a portal, right? And so you are going to be passing through this door, and you're kind of saying something about where you're going, right? Symbolically or metaphorically. But the Mask of the Past is probably the most interesting one for our purposes here, because what we're talking about is, we've already said it a couple times, but you are not allowed in the game to talk about your character's past, in or out of character. You make your character and you don't tell us anything about them. All we know about them is just the little descriptive bit that you read at the beginning, but otherwise we don't know anything else. And the reason why I do that is because, or the reason why the game does that is because in the between, we're interested in learning about these characters' pasts at dramatic points in play, not all front-loaded in the beginning, right? And so kind of getting to this idea of, I consider the Between to be a very sort of cinematic kind of game. If we were watching, like a prestige television show, we don't learn everything about the characters all at once, right? We learn about them, we learn about their past, often through flashback, or through conversations, at dramatically interesting moments. And so that's what happens with the Janus Mask. You have these 7 prompts for the past, and let's say my character is trying to escape the vampire, and we do some die rolls, and because of the die roll, the vampire gets me. We narrate the vampire draining my blood and leaving my desiccated husk on the ground, dead, right? But then I can say, no, I'm going to mark a Mask of the Past. I'm going to do what it says to do, which is usually narrating some kind of flashback. And we get a glimpse of the character. We get a glimpse of how they ended up in a position ultimately to be facing down a vampire, right? We get a glimpse of their past, and then we essentially retcon it. Like, we basically do the vampire killing me was an alternate timeline, we'll say. Instead, we narrate something different. We narrate something different happening, and so that's kind of the idea. So I think that players should think about their characters' pasts, and indeed the Mask of the Past provides a really nice roadmap for what your character's backstory might be and how you develop their backstory, but you just don't tell us yet. You don't tell us until the mechanics say to tell us, until we're in the middle of play, then you tell us. And that's basically it. It's just this idea of revealing your past in a dramatically interesting moment. It's also a currency in the game, so you can kind of avoid danger. And but the little bit of like narrating your bad outcome and then retconning the bad outcome, that is pure Jason Cordova game design. Like I love the idea. I love the idea of I want to see the bad stuff even when we succeed, right? Like it's more fun to me to watch the characters die, but them not really die, than it is to not. So
yeah, I mean, we're talking about cinematic. I mean, this is a classic trick of the cinema where you see something bad happen and you're like, that can't happen to the character right now. And
it's dramatic irony, right? Yeah.
Dramatic irony. Either it's like a dream or them imagining something, but when it first happened, the viewer still felt it happen.
Right, exactly.
Even though it might be an imagination or alternate reality or something, but it still evoked the feeling. And the fact that you don't have to tell it to everyone, so it's a surprise.
Exactly.
Like you are the storyteller and the consumer of the story at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a really great way of looking at it. And that's exactly right. I mean, it should be like a big moment, like, and I've had people who like when they're really into the between, I love this, like, in between sessions, they will like review their Mask of the Past and they will come up with whole like scripted, like narrations, which I think is great. Like, and so that whenever they mark that box, they're ready. They're like, okay, strap in, here we go. I'm telling a story. And that's the appropriate time. Like, that's when I want to hear all your cool character stuff, is when you've marked that box and you're entitled to tell us, because you're doing it at a moment when we're all like really invested and we want to hear it. I don't think people are as invested before the game starts, and so so I say save it. Yeah, and indeed in the between you must. So yeah.
It's really a moment in like, when you're sitting with your siblings, cousins, family members, and everybody's taking a turn and telling okay, that was your story. Now this is what happens. Or this is my story. This is my horror story.
Yeah.
Get strapped in for that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also the Janus Mask is also it doesn't just live on the character sheet either. The Janus Mask also lives on the threat sheets, right? Because they well, not all of them, but most of them have an aspect of the Janus Mask there as well. So on the playbooks, it's the Mask of the Past and the Mask of the Future. But on, for example, the St. James's Street Ghost, it's the Mask of the Unquiet. And so when you mark that mask, everyone at the table has to tell a ghost story, right? You all have to tell about a time from your childhood when you experienced a haunting, right? And so it's fun, right? Like, and it's very cinematic, it's very dramatic, and it's great fun. And so that it all kind of goes back to that kind of like collaborative storytelling thing, and that's sort of like using the game's structures and procedures to kind of like facilitate that very like kind of collaborative sharing style of play,
Yeah, go ahead, Aman.
No. I was thinking I interrupted you. So like, I was just acknowledging that.
No, I just want to say, I think one of the things that I'm sure, Amon, I've seen you with this, so I'm sure you relate to it. One of the things both of us struggle with is pushing our players to like get out of a scene where they're fooling around and not doing anything. And like, because I think we get so caught in enjoying seeing the party members just interact with each other.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing something foolish, even if it's something that you really didn't want to see happen in this session, or you're mentally thinking, I need to prepare for this in the next 10 minutes. But with the threats itself, the sort of cases that each player needs to solve and come together to really find the clues for, how do you implement that sense of urgency without feeling like you're railroading them, but also keeping them constantly reminded of the fact that these are actual threats that are people around you are being subjected to, even though you're not at this moment in this room?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's advice on how to do that in each threat, right? So basically, the way it works is you can have, over the course of several sessions, you can stack up to 3 active threats at a time, and sometimes 4, because some of the playbooks have threats that are unique to the playbook, and if the player puts that in play, you can have 4 going, right? And so straight away, like pretty quickly after a few sessions, like it's really like, they have a lot of trouble, a lot of problems to solve. But each playbook, or each threat sheet that the keeper has gives you advice on like, okay, if Hargrave House is ignoring this, then here's how you should react, right? And at a kind of fundamental level, the threats don't like being ignored, right? like even though Hargrave House is trying to stop them, the threats don't like being pushed to the side, right? So Sally No-Face, you've gone 2 sessions without addressing the Sally No-Face problem. Sally's going to start to get, a little upset. Like, how come Hargrave House isn't paying attention to me, right? And so maybe Sally No-Face kills a side character that Hargrave House has grown really attached to, right? That would be an appropriate reaction, because they've kind of let Sally go unaddressed for a little while, right? Or maybe there is, there's a threat that is kind of involves like this sort of like this sea creature, right? That is kind of terrorizing this park, and it's creating like a little hysteria in the city. Well, maybe that hysteria starts to spread, right? Or maybe people are like really excited by the sea creature and they're like selling sea creature memorabilia or whatever, and so it becomes kind of annoying, right? Like, you basically just, it doesn't really have a system like a Blade style clock. There's nothing like that. It's more just like, if they're ignoring this threat, here are some ways that the threat might, like react, and like how things might kind of build up and boil over if Hargrave House is ignoring it. And that usually is enough to get Hargrave House's attention to like, oh, we probably should do something about this. Like the St. James's Street ghost, like, there's a family living in that house. Like, you can just start tormenting that family and making it really clear to the characters or the players, like, listen, this family is not going to last much longer. Like, they're really having a hard time. And maybe people start coming to Hargrave House like with heightened problems, like maybe that opium den owner is like, hey, these bodies are still in my basement, and the cops are like they're asking questions like, I need you to come deal with this. So yeah, there are ways you kind of, can kind of like amp up the pressure, but it's very much like sort of to the keeper's discretion, right? And like to decide like, okay, you know what, you've been kind of ignoring this one. And also, the structure has a role to play, because the 2 main phases of play are the day and the night. Yeah. And in the day phase, as the keeper, you are advised to let the players sort of do whatever they want to do. It's their phase. If they want to just sit around and like talk and be vampy with each other, that's fine. Let them do that. If they want to, focus on something like their dawn questions or something to get XP that doesn't have anything to do with the threats, that's okay. Let them do that. But at night, it's your turn as the keeper. So I always like to say the day phase belongs to you, but the night phase belongs to me. And when I say the night phase belongs to me as the keeper, I mean it. And so no matter what you wanted to do during the night phase, the threats are going to have their say. So Sally No-Face is going to infiltrate Hargrave House and try to kill you. Or the Limehouse Lurker is going to go on a bloodbath, or whatever, right? Like, so that's another way too. You kind of like, let Hargrave House do their thing in the day phase, but in the night phase, you can kind of react really strongly as the keeper, because that's your time, to make their lives complicated. So.
I also noticed you have a mastermind in the game as well.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the mastermind. Yeah. I should have mentioned them in the introduction, because they're a really, really important part of the game. Yeah, the mastermind. So at the heart of all of this, so there's all these monsters, there's all these serial killers. Ultimately, if you play a campaign of it, Hargrave House is going to have to confront this criminal mastermind. The mastermind is the one who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And Hargrave House is going to be finding clues connected to the mastermind as they investigate these other threats. And eventually they will have to confront the mastermind and stop them from destroying the crown, right? And the core game has one mastermind who is Mrs. Theodora Brathwaite, the aforementioned pirate queen of Barbuda, although now she's the second richest woman in the empire because of she's turned her pirate fleet into the much more lucrative import and export business. And but she's trying to destroy the empire, right? And here again we have like an interesting kind of like meta moral quandary kind of situation, because to some degree Hargrave House is upholding a bad system and the mastermind is the one who's kind of in the right because they want to destroy a bad system, but that doesn't matter because your remit is to stop them. And so that's sort of the idea behind the mastermind. They have to confront the mastermind. Other masterminds are a little bit more obviously evil. Like Vice Admiral Flag is this like kind of Lovecraftian cult leader guy who wants to, sow horrifying chaos in the world. Jizad, the High Imperator of Venus, is clearly much more evil. He's doing a Venusian invasion of London, right? So yeah, you have these masterminds, and we have 4 masterminds in the core game, but there's also lots of like homebrew masterminds out there that people have done, and the backer kit version of the game is going to have new masterminds as well. So yeah, the mastermind is like the campaign framework for the whole game. Like you're doing all these little, these mysteries, and these monsters and stuff, but you're ultimately gonna have to face the mastermind. So.
Is there a way to like also come up with new masterminds? Like you said, there are a lot of homebrew versions as well. So is there a certain thinking behind it? Like if somebody wants to run a game and probably wants to make a setting where they can or an adventure or a situation where they can have another mastermind. So is there a guy?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the way you make it work is you choose threats that are thematically close to the mastermind that you're doing, right? So of the published, so like Jizad, which is the Venusian warlord, if you're doing that mastermind, you're kind of doing a sort of more high adventure science fantasy version of the Between, a little bit more League of Extraordinary Gentlemen than Penny Dreadful, in which case you pick threats that are maybe more sci-fi, in nature than like gothic horror in nature. But yeah, you could totally do that. Like you could have a mastermind that is like, in another part of the world even, right? And I think as long as you're picking threats that are kind of thematically and tonally similar to what your mastermind is, I think, and there's plenty to pick from. Then I think you're okay.
I think it's really cool that even in a world filled with a lot of supernatural and horror, and the monster hunters themselves having a lot of powers, it's cool to see that the mastermind's true power comes with their wit, wit and their wealth, and that's really cool.
They're smart and rich. That's their superpower. They're the Lex Luthor of the Between, right? Yeah. Well, that was the original idea with the masterminds, and that's certainly the idea with Theodora Brathwaite, the sort of like original mastermind, and Flag as well. But I think other people have kind of like they've created masterminds that are like more supernatural, and that's okay. But I think like the original idea behind the masterminds was like, okay, there's all this supernatural stuff. Like you said, there's all this supernatural stuff, and the mastermind's whole thing is they're just very smart and very rich, and that's their power. So yeah.
The final boss.
Aman, Monica, any questions from you before? I think we could do maybe a quick character creation.
Yeah,
I would love to do that.
Yeah, I have sent everyone a link. I hope that link still works, but it will be in your DM. But also, I'm going to take this opportunity to also shout out our keeper for our 2-shot that's going to be happening over the next 2 weeks. Graciously from the Gauntlet server, I asked Jason whether we could still find a way to play this game, play test it a little. And we did have Wes Franks from the Gauntlet server and also the founder of Caddy and Comfort, who will be taking us on this little horror journey for the next 2 weeks. So this is a sheet that I'm sorry, Wes, that we're going to be like using a little before our session 0, but just to show everybody how character creation essentially happens. Now, what is everyone thinking? Do you think we should go with Jason? Would your favorite be if the Explorer?
No, well, I actually don't recommend the Explorer for a 2-shot. I think the Explorer is best in a full campaign. I think a lot of what they do is not going to really come to life so saliently in a 2-shot. I would also say the same about the Mother. I think the Mother is more of a campaign character. But I think all the rest are probably fair game. And I would, I'd probably avoid the Martian also, because if Wes is planning to do kind of more of a horror thing, the Martian may not be a great fit. And you're not allowed to do the Unquiet. The Unquiet's not allowed because that's an unlock. That's an unlock one that you unlock in the second campaign. But
how about
my favorites for like, especially for like a 2-shot, I would say the American, the Undeniable, the Vessel, or the Legacy. Those are the 4 that I would focus on for a 2-shot because they have like powers and abilities that are much more immediately useful. The Orphan, the Unquiet, those are unlockable, and the Martian I think is just totally not quite right unless you know you're playing a particular kind of campaign. And the Explorer is definitely like more of a, and the Mother are more of like, well, I don't know. I think you do the Mother in a 2-shot and that'd be okay. You could have fun with the Mother in a 2-shot. You're not going to get the child made in 2 sessions, but you can at least explore the idea of the child, and I think that's probably okay. The Explorer is the main one where it's like, in 2 sessions, you're not going to get much out of it, I don't think. So.
Got it. Aman, what do you think you're gravitating towards? I personally know I'm really interested in the Vessel. Like, the supernatural beings come to me.
That's my personal favorite.
Come to me.
Well, the Undeniable and the Vessel, I think I consider them like the mascots of the game. Like, to me, they encapsulate what the Between is, right? Like, the Vessel encapsulates the kind of like arcane, dark, supernatural horror aspects, and the Undeniable is like the kind of like the sensuality of the Between, right? Like, that's kind of what the deal is. So, very Dorian Gray, yeah.
And Mon, go ahead.
Yeah, I already described it previously. I am like more sucker for a side character. So I am gravitating towards So that is, and I also have a story regarding it in my head, which I'm not going to tell anyone about because it's for the game. So yeah, I have character prepared in my head already. So
sorry, for which one?
The factotum.
Oh, gotcha.
Before I say what I want to do, like, first of all, Jason, thank you so much for actually specifying what works for a shorter thing, for a longer thing, because that's something that I found does not work for a lot of systems, or they don't specify it. I mean, it'd be great to actually find it in a system like, hey, if you're playing a 1-shot, maybe don't do these things, but you won't be able to have a lot of fun. Rather, these things.
I think you can have fun with most of these in a 2-shot, but the Explorer is the one where it just.
I know, but
you're gonna be like, what did I do?
It really helps. Like, hey, you can do this, but this will be better. But again, still leaving it up to the player. For me, like, I'm a sucker for Dorian Gray. Have always been.
Oh, I knew you'd go for that.
It's a very fun playbook. It's a very villainous playbook. Like, the Undeniable is more of a villain than the threats. so you have to be ready to play a villainous character for sure.
Yeah, you all will hate me. I know. It's fine.
A lot of them are. I mean, I think Hargrave House are the bad guys. Like that's just my feeling is that they're the bad guys. So yeah, like but the undeniable is definitely the bad guy. Yeah.
Well, Aman, since you are our guest for tonight as well, how about we start filling in the undeniable sheet for this one?
Yeah, let's do
Sure.
that.
So do you want to read in and I'll start filling it in as well.
Okay. So again, since this is me laying my eyes for the first time on this, what's the progress thing gonna look like? Or where should I start and where should I go?
Well, so this online character keeper that you're using, which is an official thing that we made, it's guided character creation. So if you look at the little yellow box, it tells you, like, we've made it really easy. You just follow the instructions of what that yellow box says and you'll have your character made. Making one pen and paper is not much harder. Like you just make a few choices. Like character creation just takes like a few minutes. But basically, I think it might be helpful just for people watching the stream if we read this like introductory text about the undeniable first, just to get a sense of like what the character is. I think that'd be great.
Would you like to read it?
And I can read it. Or
oh no, please, Jason, please take it's your words.
I'll read
Love
it.
to
Yeah,
hear
I'll read it. Yeah. The undeniable. You have always been the most beautiful person in the room. Your looks have opened doors for you for as long as you can remember. All the money and material things anyone could want laid at your feet. Artists have found inspiration in the brightness of your eyes, the delicate curve of your cheekbones, the plump softness of your lips. One such artistic work, a masterwork, rises above them all, for it captures the essence of you. It is, quite simply, more you than you. Lately, people sacrifice everything to be near you, to please you, and if they're lucky, to touch you. But what to do when you get bored with being one of the gods? Well, what you do is you go hunt monsters with Hargrave House. So, so straight away, this character is like big energy, right? Like this character is here to dominate the room. And so, but to start, you're gonna just if we follow the guideline here for the character keeper, just put your name in that little player name box there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And it's going to want you to put your pronouns as well. And now you're going to choose your character's first name. Now you have a drop-down list there, but you can also just make up something if you wish.
Oh, I love this first name.
Okay, what'd you go with?
Ishak.
Oh,
Ishak,
nice.
and now surname.
Okay.
Oh, these are lovely. These are really varied choices as well. It's really nice.
And they're different on each playbook, so that's fun.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Al-Shirazi.
I will say that the only playbook that doesn't have a lot of like kind of variety in terms of like nationality or implied nationality is the factotum. The factotum, they are all like British sounding names because I felt like I wanted to avoid the like kind of like a lot of like kind of tropes with like servant characters, and so you basically, per the names at least, you get to be an English butler or governess essentially. You can obviously make whatever kind of character you want to make, but that's
I love Downton Abbey, so I'm just gonna follow up on that. Exactly, I previously mentioned that as well, so yeah.
So go ahead and note what Ishak's pronouns are going to be.
Yeah. So I imagine them as a non-binary person. I mean, doesn't have like this person is so beautiful. They transcend any gender or any notions in itself.
Just
the definition of just beauty. Yeah, that's great. Beauty. I love that. Okay, so now the fun part of this part is to choose your look options. You get 3 things to pick. There's a drop down there for each of them. And it might be fun to kind of read some of those aloud so people kind of know what you're working with here. But basically, these are just 3 things that kind of, it's not what you're always wearing, but it's sort of what you're wearing right now. So, yeah.
All right. Komi, can you please just take it so like the others can also see it?
Yes. Oh, these are really cool. I loved.
Black mesh shirt.
I know. I
blue
immediately looked at topaz kimono and peacock blue sari. Like it's like ostrich feather.
Studded hedge cage, perfectly tailored corduroy trousers. Okay, perfectly tailored corduroy trousers. Okay, that's specific, and I can feel it. First of all,
you have trousers. That's a good start.
Yeah, I'm gonna choose perfectly tailored corduroy trousers because I had a corduroy trouser when I was very young,
Yes.
and I love this one so much.
I know. Cordova is amazing. It's making its comeback now.
It always goes in and out, I think. I feel like. Okay, you get to make a second choice as well.
What's a head cage?
Okay, so it is like it's kind of like a kink. It's kind of a kink thing. Like it's a sort of bejeweled metal cage around your face. That's kind of it. It's avant-garde, we'll say.
Okay. Then next, I think I'm gonna go with sheer gloves. Because I don't think Ishak would want their, I don't know, they would wear gloves because they won't want to, directly touch anything because it's just so perfect.
They want to like soil themselves in any way.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. I also love how smooth they are, like overall till now. It's like a very smooth material.
Texturally smooth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And for the final thing, I think I would go for flawless skin.
Oh,
Very good.
Of course.
Okay.
So now we know. So that's great. We have a sense of what your taste in fashion is like. That's terrific. Next is your vice. So this is the thing that is whenever you have these like kind of intimate, vulnerable scenes with other characters. This is the thing that you'll be engaged in doing. And the undeniable vices are very specific. So we could just read those off, I think, if we want.
So the first one is as you have it, cocaine.
Okay, that's fairly straightforward as far as it goes. Yeah.
The second is very interesting. Comfort the dying.
I love that one. Yeah.
Third is extravagant spending. Fourth is floggings.
What kind of undeniable do we want to be? Yes.
and the last is memento mori photographs.
Yes, photographs of the dead. Yeah.
The fourth one, you could really be a GM, like a game master of another sort, or like a DM.
I think I would go for comforting the dying, but just
those are great scenes. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost a thing like you are perfect. You look perfect. You have flawless skin, and whenever just to be able to see, what mortality and what imperfection looks like, they go comfort. I mean,
it's ironic, right? Yes.
Yeah,
it's like deeply ironic. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you also really enjoy it because you look absolutely fabulous? You look fabulous in black. That's the reason why. And every new funeral, like it's a party.
Oh yeah. Like funeral. Oh my God, people are dying. Let me see the imperfection here. I have
exactly.
Life is an imperfection.
Except for me, I'm beyond life. Abilities. Abilities are your hunter's attributes and are applied to most of the game's die rolls. For more about what each ability means, or an ability name, add +1 to a single ability.
Yes, you have a starting array, and you'll add 1 to one of them. I can give you just the quick breakdown of what they are.
Yes, please.
Vitality is anytime you're doing something that requires strength, speed, physicality. Right, that's vitality. Composure is whenever you are trying to lie, or if you're trying to maintain to keep your nerves calm, or to keep your disposition calm. That's what composure is. Reason is anything to do with intellect, mental faculty, gathering information. That's reason. And then presence is it's essentially your social stat, like your ability to flatter or intimidate or cajole or just be fabulous. And then sensitivity is rolled whenever there is something supernatural going on. So you might be doing something that seems like it's governed by vitality or presence or whatever, but the keeper might decide because of the supernatural nature of it, it's actually going to be sensitivity. So.
Okay, so I can add a +1 to any one
you
of
can.
those abilities.
Yeah. So and just so people know what we're looking at, vitality starts at 1 for the undeniable. Vitality starts at 1. Composure starts at 0. Reason starts at -1. And I think that doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means that they don't approach problems that way. Yeah. Presence is 2 naturally, and sensitivity is 0.
I think with Ishak, I have 2 choices I can take. I want to either increase my vitality or my presence. When I mean vitality, imagine I don't know if you guys know wrestling, but there is a wrestler called Rhea Ripley. She is a muscle mommy in its purest form. She's beautiful, she's strong, she has that incredible presence around her. She is the center of the stage even if she's on the side. So that's where I'm sort of confused if Ishak is someone who is, strong as well, or they just have an incredible presence. With comforting the dying, I would, with that sort of vice, I would rather have an extra in, have my presence sort of maxed out in a way.
Be able to
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
also, it'll make you very strong in social encounters, right? Yeah.
So just confirming, the maximum threshold you have is of 3, right?
3 is the max. Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Switch it to 3. Okay.
Now you're going to choose some dawn questions. So dawn questions are how you get experience at the end of the whenever you get to that phase, and so the first 3 questions are the same for everyone. But then you get to pick 2 that are specific to your character from a list of, I think there's 5 to choose from. And basically you just kind of pick what you want your role-playing focus to be. They change, you can change them periodically, but this is kind of to start.
Did you express a clear preference for the beautiful over the mundane? Did you secretly show a vulnerable side to someone? Did you create an ornate, over-the-top erotic experience for someone else's side? Did you appear in a London society wearing risque or avant-garde fashion? Did you let someone touch you and make them pay a price for doing so?
I see what you're leaning towards.
Yeah, that last question, Jason, that's my character.
I love it.
And I have to choose another one again from the same thing.
I think it's the same list, yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say
I need to ask.
I don't believe that Ishak would show a clear preference for the beautiful over the mundane, considering them approaching the dying person is a way to not just have that sort of weird mirth in that experience itself, but they won't over and I'll just outright say it. I would rather say that they secretly show vulnerable insight to someone.
Is the someone recently deceased? You go and just have a little.
Probably
hug.
because you know what? Yeah, who are they going to tell? God. They were talking to them in the first place.
Beautiful.
Okay. What's XP? When you fill all 5 boxes on the XP track, mark an advancement, then clear your XP track. Okay, so this is sort of a level advancement.
There's your XP track for advancement. You have your advancements there. The next thing to do is to, the next is the masterwork. The Undeniable has, somewhere in London, a masterwork created in their image that will bear their scars. Use the highlighted drop-down to choose its form and consider the question asked. And then you're going to choose another move. So you start with a move called the Reflection. Somewhere in London, hidden from the world, is a masterwork created in your image or otherwise inspired by your beauty. It is guarded by a cult dedicated to your worship. What is the masterwork? And now you have to just go down and choose one from that list down there. You have to scroll down a little bit.
This is under which one?
The playbook.
It's under playbook move.
Got it.
Okay.
It's line 58 of the sheet.
I have 4 options. First is a portrait painting. How do your worshippers demonstrate they are worthy to look upon it? A statue carved in your likeness. How do your worshippers punish those foolish enough to touch it? A piece of music inspired by you. How do your worshippers ensure this music is always being played somewhere? On a cathedral that is used for traditional religious services, but is secretly a temple dedicated to you.
And you can make up something too. I've had people make up all kinds of cool things for their masterwork.
Oh my God.
We're doing an actual play podcast right now, and that Undeniable in that one, their masterwork is a play that's always being performed for an audience of one. Him. So yeah. But yeah.
You know what? In this case, I would rather go for a piece of music inspired by you, because Ishak is, in a way, even though it's like Victorian era things, they would still want that influencer culture, TikTok reel thing trending everywhere.
Yes.
So like a piece of music, whether it is somebody humming, probably a piece of music that somebody can hum, and somebody's always humming it around the town. So it's in everybody's consciousness.
I love it. It's great. The rest of this move just kind of describes how, essentially, as you play, whenever Ishak does things that are bad, whenever they do things that are morally questionable or bad, which is going to be often, or whenever they witness something that is disturbing, maybe, or like that would sort of traumatize someone else, you just put all that on that piece of music, and you stay pristine and beautiful while that music degrades. And so that's kind of how that works. And so you have a little check mark, you have some boxes there, and over the course of, if you were doing a whole campaign, over the course of the campaign, once all the boxes are filled, then all of your bad behavior comes back to roost. And you have to seek absolution from another hunter. And if they absolve you, then you get to go back to, then I think you kind of like essentially like if they don't absolve you, then your character retires and goes to work for the mastermind. But if they do absolve you, you get to go back to being horrible. So, let's see what happens if they absolve you.
If they
you retire the character, but you do so in grace.
You embrace a life of humility and grace.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, you get to be absolved of your sins, or you get to just lean in and become even more horrible.
Yeah, love it.
So that's kind of your core move, and now you also get to choose an additional move to start. And so you have 5 options here. Unquenchable Thirst, which is essentially your beauty, like is unparalleled and eternal, and basically anytime you would take like a physical scar, it vanishes. And furthermore, whenever you use your beauty to influence people, you get advantage on your die rolls. Giveth is a very powerful and intriguing move. Giveth basically lets you declare at any time that a side character is secretly one of your worshippers, and so that's a fun thing. Taketh away lets you destroy a side character physically, spiritually, or socially in order to get some advantages in the game. The collection is really fascinating. You have access to a bunch of extremely rare artifacts like Joan of Arc's ashes, or an apple from the garden, or Julius Caesar's bloody toga. You have access to these items, which you just have laying on the nightstand or in the closet, and but you can use them to get advantage on die rolls, or the room, which is basically a secret room accessible only by you, whereby it's all about dark erotic sensuality, and whenever you bring people there, they really cannot. They can't, or whenever you do something there, you are very powerful in that moment, So that's the idea.
Okay, so I really like give it and take it away, so I have to choose one of them.
I know.
You gotta choose one. Yeah.
They are so.
It's going to make a real scene, no?
Yeah. At any time, you can declare that a side character secretly one of your wishes. Describe how the side character subtly, not so subtly, debases themselves before in a scene, then scar your reflection. Whenever you make a gift of something from your personal quarters to a worshipper, they will do exactly as you say, no questions asked, up to including destroying themselves. Okay. If another hunter debases themselves at your feet, you must do the following condition. Okay, so then they become a worshipper. But
another hunter can become a worshipper. Yeah.
But a hunter is not a side character, are they?
No, it's a two-part move. There's the way that it affects side characters, and then there's the way that it can affect a hunter if the hunter wishes. But basically, if they, it's an opportunity for them to get XP if they choose to go down this dark path with you. So
Interesting.
Okay.
It doesn't happen often, but every now and then it does.
I think I'm gonna. I'm taking a look at Take It Away. I feel like, for simplicity's sake, because it's the first time me making this character, I think Take It Away feels more simpler and more in line with what Ishak would do, I guess.
It's a great move. It's a really good move. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take It Away with this.
And then the last part of character creation is something you all do together as a group, where you will kind of like in Brindlewood Bay, how you kind of give each other items for your house. This is the same thing. You'll give each other items for your personal quarters. So, but that's it. Yeah, character made.
Okay. Whoa, this is some.
But already you can kind of see where it's going, right? You can kind of you should be inspired by what you're going to do with Ishak. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely inspired by I can definitely. The character sheet is almost like guiding me what choices for Ishak to make in itself. So
and then with the Mask of the Past, you'll be able to kind of add your spin to it, right? As we reveal the character's past, we'll really get to learn what Ishak is truly about, So
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think an item I'd like to add to your personal quarters is a music box that plays your tune, so that we can hear we can hear when it starts to get corrupted.
Yeah, when you.
I think I would like to give you a mirror. So you can just look at yourself the whole time.
Is there something special about the mirror? Does the mirror show something weird or different? That would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I can think about it a little bit, but it will be a mirror themed gift.
Yeah, when you play with Wes, because Wes will get a chance to give you something too. So but definitely be thinking about what sorts of things Ishak might have in what are no doubt the biggest, most luxurious personal quarters in Hargrave House. So yeah, no doubt.
Is the mirror kind of is so intricate and ornate and really
it's like that very bejeweled designer mirror.
But does it sometimes once a day or something when somebody looks at it, it can be in a random time, it sort of gives you a distorted figure?
I love that. Yeah.
There's something in the background. You are not looking quite right.
Yeah,
that'd be simple.
And you just you're looking at the mirror and it's not looking quite right. What happened to you? And suddenly blink and you're normal.
Yeah, I mean, like
That's great.
something. I don't know what that's called. But something which resembles like almost a human, but I forget what that term is.
Like an echo, that sort of thing.
No, like something that almost resembles a human. It looks similar, but that uncanny valley.
Oh, the Uncanny Valley. Yeah. Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah, I'll name that mirror Uncanny Valley mirror for you.
Uncanny message. But that's awesome. And any questions, peeps, before we wrap this up?
No, definitely not, because we got a lot of information and thank you
Yeah, it was
so
a lot.
much,
Yeah,
Jason.
we didn't talk about the unseen, but yeah, that's okay.
Oh my god! Seriously.
Yeah, like maybe we can dive into the unseen before we wrap up.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll talk about it real quick because it's probably the I feel very confident in saying there's nothing like it in any other role playing game. It is completely novel and unique, and what it is whenever you do the night phase, there's going to be this other scene going on during the night phase called the unseen, and the reason and what it is it's something going on that same night in another part of London. We want in the game to show London as a character in the story, and the unseen is how we do that. So that scene that we're doing, the unseen, has no direct connection to what the hunters are doing. It's not connected to the story at all, except it can be connected thematically. So things that are happening in the unseen might connect up with things that are happening in the hunter scenes visually, or maybe there's like a motif that's repeated, or maybe there's a color that's repeated, or maybe there's some sort of theme going on. And those connections between the two, those sort of ephemeral thematic connections, those are called echoes in the night. And when you get an echo in the night, you get an experience point. And so that is, or if you get one, you get an experience point. And so the unseen is this like very, very cinematic idea of we are going to bounce back and forth between this scene taking place somewhere in London and what's happening with our hunters. And they might thematically touch each other every now and then. And that's the unseen. And it takes a little bit to master. Like, it's not the most like immediately easy thing to do, but once you do, it leads to the most phenomenal storytelling, like just truly incredible storytelling. And I love it. It's the part of the game where, like, once you kind of get the hang of it, you're like, oh, I really like. I got what the Between was doing, but now I really get what the Between was doing. So yeah, that's what it really like.
Feels like a cold open, which like throughout the episode you continuously like sort of drop in and out of.
That's what it's kind of what it is. Yeah. It's like like when you're watching a TV show and there's like some kind of like some scene that the director never explains why we keep looking at it or why we keep seeing it, but it's like that. Yeah.
Oh man, that is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. There's just so many ways to just like bring life into the world, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really, just a quick note, I really love the fact that how well the degrees of success is defined, like as similar to like certain other horror games like Call of Cthulhu and other games where you have the degrees of success in your character sheet itself. Like, it's not the GM or the keeper doesn't always have to scramble for a DC or
right. Yeah.
Or the difficulty, which sometimes we completely mess it up as GMs.
I know, modifiers as well, having like some taking a stat from here to implement it here in 3 different ways.
Yeah, just like a 2d6, add your modifier. If it's between this and this is what you get. If it's this and that, there's a consequence, etc. Like that. I love simple rules and simplified but effective rules. Yes, that's what I was going for. But yeah, awesome. That's great.
Well, I hope you'll enjoy it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
that was amazing.
So excited, especially after Brindlewood Bay. I think we're just excited to playtest anything from the Gauntlet. Public
great.
access is what we're going to come to you for next. But
Public access is really fun. I think all our games are fun, but public access is like so. Public access is also cool. It's cool and scary. So yeah.
So before we wrap up, once again, where can we find the in-between? How can anyone support it? And a little about your the Gauntlet Discord as well, because I know a lot of people are to play there.
Yeah. So The Between is coming to BackerKit. We're going to be crowdfunding 3 books. So there's going to be the core rulebook, which is a revised and expanded version from what we originally published 3 years ago. That original version of the game, you can go get that for free, like I mentioned earlier, just to kind of get a sense of what the game is about. And it's totally playable as well. But this new version is going to have like a revised, expanded stuff in this book. The second book is called Shadow Society, and it is just more stuff for the London setting. So you can play the one mastermind from the core book, but then if you get Shadow Society, you're going to have new masterminds, new threats, and new things, so you can play multiple campaign arcs, right? And then the third book is called Sons of Another World, and that is brand new frameworks for the game, like new campaigns. Excuse me. So there's The Between Ghosts of El Paso, which takes place in El Paso shortly after the American Civil War, and there is this blood red moon in the sky that causes all the undead to rise, and so this committee of people in El Paso have to deal with that. Brand new characters, like it's totally different characters, different mastermind, different threats. It's its own game. There's The Between Unsinkable, which takes place on a transatlantic journey between London and New York. And then there is The Between Court of Wolves, which is Louis XIV's Versailles, werewolves, devil worshippers, and decadent French nobles. That's the idea behind Court of Wolves. So that third book will have those new campaigns and stuff. So yeah, that's what we're going to be crowdfunding. And you can go to BackerKit. I'm sure we'll have a link in wherever this is going to go up. And the Discord, the Gauntlet Discord is terrific. You should absolutely join our Discord because we have people playing and talking about these games all the time. I'm very fortunate in that way that people are always playing them. And so it's just a great community, really, really fun place to chat and talk. So.
And if anyone's on the TPK server, Shweta, who's one of our members, she is also running The Between as a playtest. So if you are just itching to go and start playing it right now in an IST time zone, you have that game open on the TPK server. But before we wrap up, Aman as well, thank you so much for joining us. We've had the pleasure of being able to play an adventure with Jason last year, and it's always fantastic being able to talk to you, Jason, and it's so lovely that Aman's joined us as well. I had the pleasure of attending his Infinite Tavern podcast a couple of weeks back, and it's been, having conversations is always so much fun. So, any shout outs from you too, Aman?
You guys can always follow the Infinite Tavern podcast on Spotify. We also have a YouTube channel where we're going to be releasing tomorrow, in fact, an interview with Brotherwise Games about their new RPG, the Cosbeer RPG. And we're also going to have an actual play of our own coming audio only very soon in a few weeks. So make sure to follow the Infinite Tavern podcast.
And I'm just going to give the shout out to Mon because she's too sweet to advertise herself. But if you go and see Brindlewood Bay two-shot that we did with Jason, all that artwork of our fantastic characters.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Was that by Mon? You would have seen the trailer at the beginning. I wanted to trick people a little with that Brindlewood Bay trailer. But thank you, all three of you, for being here. And it's just so lovely. I can't wait to spend the next 2 weeks playing this game and then join a much longer campaign to really check out some of those playbooks that take go a little more campaign intensive, but this is a game that I definitely can see myself really loving because of the amount of role play in it and the variety of characters, and just being able to really see everyone's imagination and, you know, get rid of any of those long silent moments where everyone's waiting for the keeper to decide what happens next. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.